diplomatic staffers to write it for them? Would that have been better?
If it had been under Derek's byline, it had looked like, had not said
what
this
if
is
it was
sponsored by
Derek
the
had written
church.
if it had no byline?
And
Which is what you're doing.
If it didn't say clearly that it was from the brand, that it was sponsored, that clearly, then you're trying to trick people, and that's clearly a problem. Which is,
you're clearly trying to trick people.
you assume
I don't mean that in the worst sense.
Or you assume.
Let me just point that. If you look at those, I mean, I just picked this out today on the blog. If you look at those 10 great things about the new PlayStation 4,
Right.
and you look at the ones that are sponsored by Sony and the ones that's allegedly written by an editorial team. Who wrote the other one?
Real quick, so like I work in the tech. I run the tech section. We had a reporter at the Sony event. We wrote a straightforward article. We had a reporter at the Sony event. We wrote a straightforward article about what was announced. And then today we wrote a second day analysis, actually kind of questioning Sony's strategy. Now the second one was written by people who work with the work with ads downstairs, who we never interact with in any editorial way.
John, I think John and I, in fact, was unaware that there had been a Sony ad, for better or for worse, but also the author of the Sony ad was the Sony Entertainment Network. This was not tricky.
No,
I did not have a staffer named Sony Entertainment Network. The issue is there is. I do think about it. The issue would have been, I think, if we run
but
it.
It looks very similar to an actual BuzzFeed article, right? It's in fact it's
published in the
designed
same template.
exactly in the same template, exactly. And the BuzzFeed review of PlayStation 4 was quite enthusiastic, let us say. Now, does the reader have any
you actually
reason?
didn't read the second story on it, I think. But John, I think, was probably unaware of the ad. But the idea that, I mean, I don't.
No, I'm just saying that when you're running an ad by Sony, that's 10 great things about the PlayStation 4, and in the same format, the only difference is that there is a slight change in color background, and the byline is there. I'm not saying that you're not fully.
So were you confused?
You absolutely are. No, I was just wondering.
So who was confused?
I'm quite a sophisticated reader. I'm not sure whether other people would be confused.
I mean, honestly,
I couldn't tell the difference in terms of tone or skepticism between the one written by Sony and the one written by BuzzFeed. And presumably you're getting paid by these people, so one has to ask, can we trust you on reviewing something where you're being paid by these people to rewrite their own ad copy?
I mean, this is a great case against virtually the entire media industry except for the dish. Which takes an excellent case against the advertising model.
No.
Like most media companies take advertising is a huge opportunity for corruption. I have actually never been, we're having worked, at the Daily News, at Politico, here, at the New York Sun, various other places. It's not something I've ever in my career come in contact with because there is this very strong tradition of separation.
Why do you think that's the case? Why on earth would anybody separate advertising from editorial, in your view?
I mean, I think there are a lot of reasons. There's also the fact of the tradition of journalism that in this place comes out.
Why did the tradition emerge?
I mean, so I'm not looking for ways to break it, so I guess I don't spend too much time thinking about it.
I think you broke it. I think the Atlantic is broken.
So what about
Atlantic brand is not a big deal.
What about?
Is the problem that you have? I mean, we've established that there's an editorial on the floor, let's say, at BuzzFeed, and there's an ad floor.
Some of the people on the ad floor apparently, according to Ben, used to work on the editorial floor.
But they're not actually writing.
Copywriters all over the place used to be journalists forever.
The issue is that the ads look too much like the articles, to you not that ad writers are writing editorial and editorials writing ads.
I think it's that companies are giving money to a media company, right? That then also writes about them.
What?
I mean, that seems like a very deep
obvious
concern.
conflict of interest.
Right, yeah.
It's an obvious conflict.
It's a case against the whole media.
And when you actually publish their version of the 10 greatest things about PlayStation the day before you do, and actually when you go onto their site, they have a whole bunch of other BuzzFeed stories about the PlayStation 4 that are not different. Once you enter the editorial vortex of BuzzFeed, once you get into those things where the adjacency matters, you're essentially reading a Sony propaganda sheet.
It's called advertising.
No, it's not called advertising. That is something else. It's called advertorial. And advertorial is a fusion of advertising with editorial writing.
What's so striking to me is that the time you hear about this, and particularly in the case of Scientology, really we hear much less about it, is from people who notice it. The point is that you notice it. The point, your argument is not that you're being tricked. Your argument is that you're being discomfited. But the discomfort is because you've noticed it. The thing with the Scientology piece, I actually think there's discomfort for reasons that aren't totally fair to the Atlantic, but that are real, is much greater with written out, with text, than with things with other forms. That doesn't strike me as a rational decision. That's just sort of a gut thing, but I think a lot of people have it.
Writing.
Yeah, so yes, people don't write.
It used to be
people
clear
don't like,
if you were writing to sell something and paid by a company to do that, or whether you were a journalist writing your own honest views about something without undue influence. That's the whole
and
point
people
of
who are comfortable with and familiar with the conventions of the New York Times know that that box in the bottom right-hand corner of the editorial page is a sponsored editorial because its text is slightly different. There's a line around it.
And it says advertisement over the top
Yes,
or something.
right. Yes, exactly.
We all know when we get to the kingdom of Dubai section.
But the thing with the Scientology piece, I mean, the issue with the Scientology, we do not.
You're
Do we all know? You know.
avoid. You are. The point. My point is simply this: advertisements go out of their way to say they're different than editorial. The whole point of this and the reason I've become discomforted is not because the BuzzFeed thing just. I happened to just look into it today. I think most people are utterly unaware of any of this.
I think most people are very sophisticated consumers.
I think most people are utterly unaware that vast sections of American journalism have now basically said, please, Mr. Ad Agency, write our copy for us, or we will write it for you. And we'll call that advertising from now on, and we'll make it look as close to our regular content as anything. And it only pops up with Scientology. But I find it just as creepy when it's Shell or Chevron on your site, where you've basically given the Atlantic Monthly's integrity, which is something you can't really, I don't think, mess with. And primarily it's the labeling. Primarily it's designing advertising, because this is the innovation. It's that the advertising impulse comes from the editorial institution in collaboration with an ad agency, in which the actual institution writes the copy rather than ad agency writing the copy, in which the ad appears in the same format, font, and type as every other article, and in fact the advertisements mimic almost exactly in their headlines and in their structure exactly what a regular article is. And now, that is obviously designed to make it look not like an advertisement, which is why, as you point out, it's working. You're winning. And I've no doubt that you can win, absolutely on that model. But I'm worried that journalism will disappear. If your only criterion is winning.
But not because of any question of ethics or church state.
It's an odd irony that we're using all that, blood money to hire great journalists. That's in fact like what we're, I don't really see the trick. Like
the trick is look, you've gone over this a million times already. I would rather you call them editorials because they are. Right?
Really quickly, Andrew, I think that you're underestimating the intelligence of the contemporary consumers. I think that the line is definitely moving, but the line is still there. It'd be like 10 years ago when Delta started putting Sky Mall in the CPUG in front of you, you would read it and go, I'm reading Sky Magazine. What's this new magazine? And then you start flipping through it, and there's things for sale. The line is still there. I think that you're uncomfortable with it moving, but it's still there.
What would obliterate it in your view?
What would obliterate it would be
The
John
line?
right about Sony.
When people decide that the line shouldn't be there.
Well, and I agree, but I think
but do you think that
the strategy here is to make the line as blurry and as invisible as possible.
No,
It's still there.
I think
they still have this slightly different color on the back,
And
they don't lie about who wrote it.
The other point I wanted to
I would
is
like
that
to know, by the way, who wrote that. I'd like a byline. I'd like a byline on those pieces.
Well, then you might actually be confused if the byline wasn't Sony, which is why we made it Sony.
By so-and-so, paid by Sony would be a great way of doing it.
Is that how most ads work? I mean,
That's how your new ad should work if they're going to be honest.
I mean, I would prefer actually.
I want to
think
know.
it's
I want
clearer
to know
if
who's
the
writing
byline-
these ads. I want to know if they're BuzzFeed. I don't want to see a piece of writing whose authorship I do not know.
So does that bother you with ads in print publications?
If they appear as articles, yes.
They test them. You'd like to know the name of the copywriter.
If
I mean,
they're
that's an
writing,
interesting
it's not a
standard.
copyright. It's not a copyright. These are articles. Okay.
10 great things you can say. 10 great things about the PlayStation. That's
Someone
an
has
article.
to write them.
I mean, but there are many ads of that.
Well, let's say The Atlantic
Well,
article,
we don't-
the era of big data by Chevron or whatever, whoever.
Actually,
it
those
was.
are, if you click on the piece and you go inside, it's written by their CMOs and COOs.
Right, which
So
I actually respect, as long as you realize
You're right.
you're
You're not-
reading a piece by the CEO of the company as propaganda in the Atlantic Monthly. The Atlantic Monthly.
I mean, that's, you say it a few more times.
Sometimes, well, some part of me just grieves at the thought that the magazine of Thoreau and Longfellow should now be basically
Who
asking
advertises?
Chevron to write its copy.
Who advertised in the days of Thoreau and Longfellow? I actually don't know.
I think
They
people.
probably showed a banner.
I think there were little classified ads, but I think people paid for it.
To be fair, I mean, nothing on the Atlantic homepage, we can get to your questions in a second, nothing on the Atlantic homepage in that top area right, has
Collateral damage.
No, it's not. It's not. I'll send it to a hurricane. I mean, to a certain extent, I feel like, you know, we have a homepage, we have little slots, those little boxes,
Yeah.
with headlines, and those headlines don't have bylines. And when you click on one of the headlines, it's in a slightly different hue. And it's true, sometimes the hue isn't in as deep a yellow or as deep an orange, not to like belittle your point, it's true, it can be confusing, and people have been confused. But then you click on the article and and it says, you know, by like, you know, John Sherman and the COO of GE, and here's the SSA of chair of big data, and it's, you know, often, you know,
I mean, these are new conventions.
On the side of the page, you have a bunch of other
I think
articles,
it's-
which are also all propaganda, which look like articles.
These are,
But a slightly different twist.
I mean, these are new conventions that are figuring themselves out and aren't as clear as the old conventions, but we'll
Okay, I'm
clarify.
just saying,
And conversations like this are actually genuine, like, I agree, like, I actually don't think arguments about the hue are trivial. Like, I do think arguments about the hue are, like, all these conventions.
How many phones
have-
is it?
Yeah,
When
those
you
are,
write advertisements
those
that
aren't,
look like you
those,
don't
I think
sense
they
it.
can be non-trivial questions without being like deeply corrosive to journalism. The way Sony telling John what to write at the PlayStation would be deeply corrosive to
Well,
journalism.
yes, I do, I agree with that, absolutely, and I've not disagreed.
Okay.
with you on
now that
that.
we've made an agreement, we're gonna go quickly. Oh, no.
Sorry, yes. Andrew, it sounds like we're
To me, the material of the magazine, not the advertising. And
See,
it's
I
called
just like-
sponsored content for a reason, because it's designed to fuse the two. And native advertising is also a term designed specifically to obscure the reality.
See, I could
Which
live
is
with
that
the word.
the actual magazines themselves are creating the advertisements for their clients. That's what native advertising is.
See, I mean,
And they may make them better.
I could live with a new word because I think advertorial, like to me, what that means is like something a usually quite low quality piece of propaganda that people are tricked into reading because it looks exactly like editorial content. Like I actually think that like that's like our trick and the trick that the business side here is attempting to pull off is to produce great content people like her know our ads and like, and there are these readers.
Okay, content is ads, is that what you're saying?
Kind of great.
So what distinguishes that content from your content?
Only the clarity
Only
of the
the-
label.
The labeling,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah, well, you don't have advertisement at the top of it.
but if they did.
It would help.
We might.
Well, I also covered the PlayStation event last night, and I felt terrible for Sony, because none of it